Hi everyone, it's great to see you all today and have you here both online and in person. Now the organic sector has a lot to be proud of. It's a globally scalable approach to organic food and farming, backed with compelling scientific evidence of the benefits that it brings to people and planet. It's safeguarded in most places by legislation that prevents against greenwashing and which is ahead of its time at the forefront of addressing and mitigating the climate and biodiversity crisis. Yet in the UK at least, we have a problem. Organic food isn't affordable, available, and accessible to everyone in society. It's not fulfilling its full potential, and that needs to change. Something different is possible. The UK has always been somewhat of an outlier. We only need to look across the channel to the continent, where the EU has set a 25% organic land target, with EU member states developing ambitious policies and incentives that drive organic production and consumption, bolster research and development, and ensure all citizens have access to organic food.
And we see this showing up in the growth trajectory of major markets around the world. So the dotted line that you can see there in blue is the UK. And the UK is notable as the only market that really stepped back in the 2007-8 recession. And that fall was really triggered by a drop in confidence from retailers. Retailers lost confidence in organic, they pulled back on listings, and therefore organic lost distribution. Without distribution, how can you buy it? And you can see kind of from the growth curve that's followed in some of those other major markets, so like the France, the Germany, Denmark, who we'll hear from later today. Other countries have easily achieved a sector that's 5 times the size it was at the turn of the millennium. And I think it's fair to say the UK has got some head height for growth.
Yeah, and in other places, organic is rightly seen as a one-stop shop for achieving net zero targets, for boosting biodiversity, for protecting public health, and for providing secure and sustainable livelihoods. And it's not just Europe. There's various countries and regions in Asia that are taking a progressive approach to supporting organic. So in Japan, they're mirroring a similar approach to the EU, and various Asian local governments are centering organic in both their agricultural and environmental policies. And we've seen in Canada, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, they're all developing ambitious organic agricultural plans. Yet in the UK, we've broadly left it to the market to provide the key mechanism for scaling organic. Now, this seemed like a good approach and a really expedient way to scale. But in reality, we've seen a number of unintended consequences of that approach. Organic often ends up premiumized and used as a margin opportunity, with very little of that premium actually making its way back to our farmers, all the while reinforcing organic's reputation as being elitist and niche. Political support for organic has historically been quite poor in the UK, and whilst it's great to see the Scottish Government's recent commitment, the English, Welsh and Northern Ireland governments are missing a huge opportunity to capitalise on the multiple benefits of organic by failing to develop their own ambitious and progressive policies and plans for supporting organic. And this needs to change. We seek to address the reality that organic is often sidelined by policymakers, used as a margin opportunity by retailers, and primarily only accessible to a minority of consumers who can afford it on a regular basis or who understand its relevance to them and their lives. But we recognise that the challenges, as well as the solutions, are related and interlinked. The reasons for the current situation in relation to organic are complex, multifaceted, and interlinked. And we've mapped a pathway for achieving organic for all, which really attempts to take all of this complexity into account. But it will only be possible to achieve with the collaboration and input of the whole organic sector. So in sharing our vision for Organic for All today, we're also inviting you to get involved. We've divided our thinking about how to make organic affordable, available, and accessible to everyone in society into 3 main areas of focus. The first area is around motivation. Making the value of organic clear for different audiences is a really important starting point, and being valued starts with being understood. The contribution that organic production and consumption makes to climate, nature, and health needs to be well evidenced and shared in a way that's fitting for the context and starts where people are. For example, policymakers may value organic for the public goods it delivers, retailers for its role in achieving net zero targets, and consumers for how it helps put tackling climate change right into their own hands. We also need to acknowledge that the current market economy has failed to significantly value and reward food and farming systems that are good for climate, nature, health, and the polluter doesn't pay for the damage that's caused to the natural world. We need to rethink our economy and make it fit for the future. That's no easy feat, but it's fundamental in the long term because markets aren't working for sustainable products right now. Many voices are calling for a rethink of our economy, and the organic sector can play a really key role in shaping what this could and should look like.
So it's clear we need to cut our cloth to engage each of these different audiences. All of these actors, all of these decision makers are looking for slightly different things. So it's about how do we show up, meet them where they are, and show that we can help them achieve their priorities. So whether it's global policy, best practice, investors with sustainability disclosure frameworks and looking to make sure that their money is going on something that's going to achieve broader good, through to retailer models like the WWF basket, but also demonstrating the business case for organic in a category context. And now more recently, the wider agricultural energy that we're seeing about regenerative agricultural practices. Organic has to show up and have a seat at the table and have a voice that's going to be heard and influence in all of those spaces. And that's something we're really conscious of. It's something that we at the Soil Association, both within the charity and certification, put a lot of effort in. But we recognise there are so many more voices across the sector doing this. So how do we join forces and come together to have more impact, be better heard as a sector? And this carries on the flip side right the way through to the public. I've had so many conversations with those of you who are brand owners going, how do we get our customers to really connect with the benefits of organic? And it's about meeting consumers where they are, their concerns on health, their concerns on sustainability, but actually probably when it comes to a marketing point of view, how do we just be more relevant, be more of a brand for me? So relevant in a lifestyle context. And actually, I think we've got a real secret weapon, actually, in some of this conversation. We're seeing such growth in spaces like organic textiles, so through the GOTS, Global Organic Textile Standard, but also health and beauty, so the Cosmos Standard. Those two more lifestyle kind of consumer areas play a really big role in driving consumer reappraisal and kind of greater engagement with organic as a whole. So there's a lot to consider there, and this idea of how do we motivate those key audiences, where do we meet them, is going to form the basis of our first panel conversation a little bit later on.
So before we get to that, the third area of focus is making sure organic is supported. So it must be financially and practically supported in order to scale. Favourable national policies backed up by appropriate financial support and incentives have been a real cornerstone of organic sector development in other countries. And they're really the engine of organic market growth as they provide the business case for farmers to convert and stay organic and support innovation and different routes to market. We know that organic agriculture is knowledge intensive. Farmers need access to information, training and support, whether they are new entrants or seasoned practitioners. And diverse and often marginalised voices need to be brought to the fore. The organic sector needs to also be supported by robust legislation and standards that encourage innovation and growth of the sector. These aspects must be addressed through operationalised organic action plans. Such plans should be supported in the UK nations that have committed to developing them, like Scotland, and need to appear in the other nations that haven't yet.
The roots of organic are really in indigenous farming practices, and that's been about passing down shared knowledge generation upon generation. So as Sarah says, it's a knowledge-intensive way of farming. So farmer training, education, knowledge exchange all have a really important role to play. And our organic standards are obviously a cornerstone of how we show up in today's market. So post-Brexit, actually, is there an opportunity coming out of it? The next few years are going to be about regulation, where things go on import, on export with key markets, but crucially also, what do the first GB organic standards look like in regulation post-Brexit? There's a real opportunity for us to have a considered collective voice across the industry to influence and land that future with government effectively. There's also a lot of funding flying around at the moment. There are legally binding targets around net zero, about addressing the nature crisis. So there is both public and private investment that's looking into that sustainability transition, looking at a just transition. And there is every reason for the organic sector to grab a piece of that funding pie. So how do we get the next generation of organic startups accessing that investment, but also existing organic businesses growing and evolving and accessing that investment as well? We need that disruption, and there are parts of the organic sector, so a classic example is UK arable. So we grow, for example, oats really well in this country. We don't have a good organic infrastructure around that. And so part of our question on all of this is actually how are there certain sectors where we take more of a deep dive approach? And this is about unlocking kind of traditional supply chains, looking at it as more of a connected supply network, and bringing in voices from across that network to look at how we can remove some of those blockers and scale growth in key areas where we know we can produce organic at scale in this country.
Thanks, Alex. So a third area of focus is around availability. There must be easy access to organic food, both at home and in public settings such as schools and hospitals. And to achieve this, we're going to need to overcome barriers to retailers selling more organic products. We're going to need to support the development and growth of alternative routes to market that bring people closer to the sources of their food. And we need to recognise that community-led initiatives are going to be vital in addressing the current unequal access to healthy organic food, so that it's not just the wealthiest in society who can eat organically. We'll also need to address some of the key sticking points. Alex referred to some, so in supply chains where there's lack of investment in infrastructure threatens to undermine availability, and we've got something to solve there. Now, as an organisation, we're really committed to playing our part in making this vision of organic being available, accessible, and affordable to all come to life. But we can't do it alone. We really need your support. So over the next few months, we want to talk to the organic sector, starting today, to figure out how we can work together and uplift and link the great work that is already happening, and also plan new activities that drive the shared outcomes that we all want to see.
So that's part of the reason also I'm so delighted to have such a broad range of organisations joining us today, from brilliant consumer FMCG brands to some of the world's most professionalised retailers, hospitality innovation, campaigning NGOs, to the nuts and bolts of supply chain actors. This physical and virtual room is full of change makers. And so the question is, how do we keep coming together? We've seen how achievable this transformation is in other countries, and tapping into our global network is going to be a really key part of moving this on. So that's the theory, and today is just about starting that conversation. So what's next? We've got the next few months where we really want to hear from you. There'll be a survey coming out off the back of today, but also come and chat to us in the breaks. We'd love to hear kind of your initial response to this. We're really committed to having some industry roundtables during the course of the spring, so that we can bring people with key voices in key themes across the sector together and start to sweat through some of these focus areas and unpack what it is that we can do when we can really collaborate with impact. This sector is built on grassroots collaboration, and it is our unique competitive strength against business as usual. So today is about sitting back and taking in the inspiration and using it as a starting point. We're not coming from a blank canvas. We've got 50 years of legacy behind us. But this is about a reset moment for us to take the industry forward to the next level of what we've seen in other countries is so eminently achievable. So where better to start the rest of today's proceedings than hearing from our keynote speaker? I'm really delighted that she could join us today. The lead author on the 6th assessment report from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they're the people that tell all the governments around the world what's really happening and just how off track we are at the moment. And she's a leading climate expert who's providing advice on climate science to the public, policymakers, media and business, and currently advising UK Parliament on research evidence to better inform scrutiny, legislation, and that all-important debate. So please join me in welcoming Professor Tamsin Edwards to the stage.